tell you the truth, I'm worried about America.
Well, thank you for the concern. I'm actually a little bit worried about China.
We're worried about each other.
Because when you have a government, a political system that's built its entire legitimacy on the idea that we're helping the economy grow and we're helping you get rich. And so at least stay out of politics. We're going to suppress some of your individual freedoms and your right to read what you want and control the internet, but we're letting you get rich. That's their entire claim to legitimacy. And so what happens when the economy starts to slow? What happens when they can't keep pumping up the economy to 6.9%? What happens when it slows to 2 or 3 or 4%? That's what I've seen happen in other countries around when the economy slows, if that's the only claim to legitimacy you have. On the flip side of that, and I would agree with you that a lot of people probably in China believe that this is a stable system that's allowed them to get rich and grow, especially if they live on the coastal areas. And, I always would ask the question when I was in China to officials who didn't like me very much, saying, well, yeah, if you think that everybody thinks that this is the best system to have, why don't you prove it? Just have an election. You'll win. Just have the Singapore model. They go to the polls every 4 years and they get reelected because people think that's the best model to have. So, I would just have to push back a little bit on this idea that there are no examples of success anywhere in the West. China is the only example of success. I mean, yes, China managed to grow at 10% a year for a long time, but they were starting at a low base. China was way behind where it should have been. So it was not actually miraculous that they were growing. They were just catching up to where they should have been. Now the trick is going to come now that they're entering this higher income status, if they can continue that kind of growth rate going.
I mean, I think what I said was the new democracies, there have been very few success stories, probably close to none.
I would look at Latin America. There are quite a few.
Who? Brazil?
Brazil? Well, yeah. Why not?
No, I don't think. Come on, look at Brazil. I mean, if you look, I did an analysis of the so-called BRICS country, BRICS, right? And the last 20 years, I've changed the name. I call it C-Rest, China and the rest. If you look at the other 4 countries in BRICS, if you separate their numbers, China is the only one that carried water. Okay, China contributed 90% of the collective growth of BRICS.
What metrics are you using though for success? Just GDP growth?
Well,
living standards?
Yes, I mean, let me tell you what measure I do use, and it's not about getting rich. It's not about getting rich. We lifted 700 million people out of abject poverty in 40 years. This is not a term getting rich could capture. All right? I mean, if we look at poverty alleviation, if we take out China's numbers, the rest of the world had gone backwards in poverty alleviation. So we lifted all of the people out of poverty in the last 30, 40 years. And this is not about getting rich. It's about people living with basic dignity.
I agree with that. That's been a tremendous accomplishment of the Deng Xiaoping. But as I mentioned before, a lot of that was just a corrective for where China should have been had it not been for the first 30 years.
That's not the case. Let me correct that. So in 1949, our average life expectancy was 41 years old. Okay, I don't know about the two of you. You look young. I had already lived past.
You're the youngest looking dude on the stage.
41 years old, okay? And literacy rate, 15%. Immunization rate, 0. By 1976, when Mao died, average life expectancy was 68. All right, literacy rate was 80%, close to 100% of young people. Immunization rate, 100%. There's no way that Deng Xiaoping would be able to launch the reforms successfully without those enormous, amazing accomplishments. In fact, if you look at the numbers, by 1978, at a very low income per capita, still poor country, on that basis, China was already within striking distance to developed countries in terms of the UN Human Development Index. Okay, amazing accomplishment in the first 30 years. A lot of problems, Cultural Revolution, Great Leap Forward, disasters, catastrophes. But to characterize somehow China, I mean, no, China was where it should be in 1978.
I would disagree with that. I would think China should have been a lot further along than they were, and then the Deng Xiaoping reforms were a corrective to that, but we'll disagree on that point.
Okay, but there's just one measure. I think just living in, working in China and seeing how the economy has developed. If you ask a young person in their 20s today whether they're better off than their parents, whether they believe that their children will be better off in the future, there's a lot of hope. It's that on that positive trajectory. If you go to the U.S. and interview college graduates, whether they're better off than their parents and whether they think their children are going to be better off, there is a little bit of a mixed response.
I mean, if you go to Brazil, go to Chile, go to Taiwan, the numbers are dismal. I mean, people are miserable if you look at the numbers. I mean, there's only one way to characterize it. I mean,
well, I'd like to leave it to Professor Richburg to respond to that.
First of all, I would just take a little bit of issue saying that, because I talk to mainland students all the time who are my students. When I lived in Beijing, I had friends there. I would not say that every one of them are saying, oh, my life is better than, they'll say my life is better than my parents, but they're not necessarily so much more hopeful about the future. The things I heard were, boy, I can't afford a house anywhere near the center of the city. I can't even afford an apartment. There are college graduates who can't get jobs. So I think they have some of the same fears and frustrations as young people everywhere about the future. They don't think that they've benefited from the economic reforms as much in recent years. The one common refrain I used to hear from people, and I still hear it from my students here, is, yeah, we have $2 trillion in foreign exchange reserve. The country is rich, but the people are still poor. And I've heard that over and over again. So I would not necessarily equate this great economic growth and, boy, look, on paper, they're better than Brazil, with saying, wow, the people are so much better off and so much happier.
I'm sure you can find anecdotal evidence. I mean, everybody could find anecdotal evidence to prove their case, but I only look at macro numbers. I mean, if you look at the survey data, you look at the peer research numbers, I mean, there's no credible, you can't find one credible public survey data that says the Chinese are not happy or not optimistic about the future. I mean, it's the complete opposite. I mean, this is the most optimistic people on earth.
If you believe public survey data out of China, yeah.
I don't know. Well, maybe I don't, but I don't know what else to believe. I mean, so you have to base your judgment on something. You have to base your judgment on something.
So before we're really out of time, I just like to pose one question. I think this is a very lively debate. There's a lot of food for thought. But are we closer than we think? I mean, are there some commonalities in terms of values? Maybe just one or two words. What do you think that is? What is the commonality, Eric?
I think the Westerners, especially America, need to worry about their own problems. They need to move a little bit towards caring for the collective, and not worry too much about not focus so much on the individual. I think America has let its country stagnate because it cares too much about the individual, too much about liberty, and less about the collective. And the Chinese probably need to care a little bit more about the individual, I would say.
Oh, okay.
I was just about to say his last point. I think as China grows and develops and China rises to become a world power, I think commensurate with that, they have to start giving a little bit more openness to their own people. They have to start letting people read a little bit more what they want. They have to start letting people be able to do what they want, move around the way they want. I mean, it's, if somebody wants to go on the internet and check out some foreign website for something, they have to allow more creativity. They have to allow people to experiment in fields. They don't, why are you censoring movie scripts? Why are you censoring artistic expression? They have to start, there's a reason why you get so much innovation coming out of the US and why so many people go to Silicon Valley to invent things, because there's a lot more openness to, in the education system, and that's another big area that they need to work on. So, yes, maybe the US could use a little bit more collectivity, but I think unless you allow more individual interpretation, individual expression, they're going to be stunting where China could be.